man. Oh my goodness. I think we have sound. I think we have sound. I think I might even be in focus. Let me know if I'm in sound, I have sound and am in focus. I am in focus. I was using my phone there to try a different intro, live intro, an actual live shot of this morning. I had it pointed at, let's see, sound is up and I'm in focus. I'm using a new camera. I've got my mic hooked up a different way. I've got 2 new cameras. A lot of things have changed in the background of the show, and I was very nervous this morning that none of it would work, and there's a very good chance that it will crash and burn. Oh my goodness. Before I get too deep into it, let's set my timer. Boop, 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 boop. 20 minutes. 20 minutes. 20 minutes is how long we're going to hang out. So get comfortable, and let's hang out for a little bit. This is the OscopeWizard Show. I am Gabe, the OscopeWizard. It turns out you can call yourself whatever you want on a show, and if you do it enough times, people will start to agree with you. So maybe in a future show, I will become Gabe the astrophysicist, and we'll see if I can just fool people into thinking I'm an astrophysicist. Probably not. I would say the likelihood is low on that. But let's begin with some chit-chat. I like talking. It's one of my favorite hobbies, maybe my 3rd favorite hobby. My first favorite hobby is probably eating. I love to eat, so it's called eating, my favorite hobby. 2nd favorite hobby, probably basketballing. I love basketballing, playing basketball. 3rd favorite hobby, talking. That's debatable. I'm sure Mrs. OscopeWizard will probably debate that, whether I like basketball or talking more or eating. She might debate that I like talking more than I like breathing, which there is merit to that argument. Let's see. Sound good. Focus is good. Colors very vivid. It might be overly vivid. I don't know how to work the camera that well yet. Chit chat. Let's talk about weekends. What did you guys do over the weekend? I have some pictures from my weekend, and thank you very much. There was a happy belated Mother's Day to Mrs. OscopeWizard. She hopefully had a good Mother's Day. It was a very low-key Mother's Day. She asked for one thing. She didn't want to do dishes at all during the day. And I got so close to making this happen. I washed dishes. I tried to stay on top of it, and I came in one time, and the dishwasher had been turned on, not by me. And I'm pretty sure not by any short little mini OscopeWizards. She had to turn on the dishwasher, which was kind of a bummer. Nope. StarCraft 2 is probably in the top 5 favorite pastimes that I have. That is true statement. I still love StarCraft. I'm an old man, and now I'm turning my son into a prematurely old man as well. I tried some tofu soup from a kit. I love Asian soups, pho, tofu soup, udon noodle soup. We have an Asian market. We braved it. I say we. This was a royal we. It was mostly not me who braved it, but Mrs. OscopeWizard, who has been going out and gathering groceries. We made the tofu soup, and it was pretty good. I'm going to say this packet was good, so I give it a thumbs up. That tofu soup was good. I also tried to add a simple connector to my Raspberry Pi, and of course, that ended with me pulling the whole thing apart and getting a soldering iron, because what engineer doesn't start with a simple task, only to make it much more complicated and far more involved than it has to be? I mean, that's what engineers are all about. One of my favorite sayings is, if it ain't broke, keep fixing it until it is broke. Tried another soup this weekend, some more Asian soup. This was an udon noodle soup. Again, thumbs up on this one. Not as good as the tofu soup, but pretty good. Pretty doggone good, if I do say so myself. I mean, essentially all you do is warm up. You warm up water, and put the packet into it. So I am able to accomplish that. That is the limit of my cooking still. I did some lounging in the hot tub, or as my phone is constantly autocorrecting, hot tube. So now around here it's hot tubing. So I did some hot tubing. If you have not gotten yourself a hot tube, get a hot tube ASAP and get it delivered to your house. They are not that expensive. We, again, royal we, Mrs. OscopeWizard, made homemade mozzarella cheese. Did you guys know you could make mozzarella cheese at the house? You just make it. She mixed it up. This is a cup full of mozzarella, and then we turned that into homemade pizza using some wild former bagel dough that had gotten kind of well, it was this close to gaining intelligence and escaping from the refrigerator, so we had to cook it. Otherwise, it was going to escape into the wild and make all kinds of wild bagel dough, and we couldn't have that. So what did you guys do this weekend? Anything in the chat you want to say? Anything cool? Anybody do anything cool? I know we've been stuck at home for a long time. Mrs. OscopeWizard is the kitchen wizard. That is true. I am the OscopeWizard, but honestly, as far as life skills go, kitchen wizard, far more exciting, I think. Some people did some gardening. My mom gardened. That has always been one of her favorite pastimes. I would like to point out, though, gardening would imply one is working in a garden, and I did speak to her this weekend and know for a fact that her garden is a bunch of pots. So she mostly moved plants from one pot to another pot. That's what she considers gardening. I find it very humorous because she lives on a fairly large chunk of land and still prefers potted plants. So her garage is a huge pot garden, which is, you know what? A huge containered garden might be a better way of putting it, just in case anybody's listening that would like to go look into it. Today is going to be more talk on probes, because last week, today is Tuesday, May the 12th. Last week on Thursday, we talked about near-field probes, which are the closest thing to an actual magic wand that I have. I find them endlessly fascinating. Container gardening. That's what I think that is the actual official term. Chat is helping me out. Sometimes when you're talking to yourself in an empty room, you struggle to find the words. Luckily, I have a few people that are also watching and can help me out. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Let's figure out what we're going to do. So the closest thing to magic that I own, we should probably change that a little bit. Let's say the closest thing to magic that I own, part deux. So now we got that. The closest thing to an actual magical device that I own, part two. I have a long and storied history of magical devices. When I graduated from high school, it was a long-standing running joke in my family that I wanted the next device that I was going to get did everything. I remember when I was about 12 years old and I got my first flight controller for computer games. I ran up and down the stairs. I was like, this does everything! And then shortly thereafter, I got an Ad-Lib sound card, which Ad-Lib, they barely even make sound cards. They might be a part of Creative Sound Blaster. At the time, though, they were bitter rivals. I got a sound card, and I was like, it did everything. And then when I left for college from high school, my parents got me what was a Layla, so a very early multi-track computer-based recording system from 1998 when recording sound digitally was still pretty new, and I had this 8-channel input sound card. It doesn't mean it was a fancy sound card. You can get them now for much less money, but I was like, it does everything. So this today is a magical probe that does everything. Let's see if I can find it. You know what I probably should do is turn the camera on so we can actually see. And boom. The probe set. The near field probe set. Ta-da! I'm very excited. Reset button. Yes, we gotta start with the preset button. I have this really quickly up here because every day I've been trying to do a scope picture of the day, SPOTD, scope picture of the day, spotted. And today we are looking at a little bit of scope art. So I love XY diagrams on oscilloscopes, and people make all kinds of crazy pictures with them. If you have a really cool idea for some scope art, let me know, and I would love to try to make this scope more magical than it already is. With this is what I got going on today, so it's all kinds of cool scope art. So that's my top scope, and of course, I mean, I'm the scope wizard, so I have a bottom scope too, because seriously, people, total pro. And as my mom helpfully pointed out, first things first, let's hit the preset button. Known state. You got to start with a known state, people. And then we are looking at this charger that we were looking at from the other day. And I was using my phone today so that it would lose charge. And now I am going to charge it with my charger. And we are going to look at the electromagnetic noise coming out of this charger. And we are going to try to determine how much noise is coming out, what noise is coming out, maybe even why the noise is coming out. Let's see if we can do that. So it's pretty simple. I have this probe hooked into my probe holder, handy dandy probe holder. If you don't have a probe holder, seriously, are you even a professional engineer? Get yourself a probe holder. They're not expensive and they will make your life so much easier. Look, I have two hands free, and the probe is being held. Come on, nobody's better than that. Get a probe holder. No, not many people have that magical third hand. Plugging in my phone. So again, these little magnetic. Come on, get also net dot. Find them, net dot Gen 12. I find them awesome. So I can see that my current is being drawn out of my charger. It looks like it's drawing about 2 amps, so 1.89 amps. And let's see what is going on my oscilloscope. Boom, there's my oscilloscope. Let's take a quick look. I probably need to, well, I'm getting a little closer, so let me see. There we go. I'm still in focus. Let's get my scope configured. So let's give it a little bit more sensitivity. So I'm going to turn the scale to a smaller scale, meaning that my scope is more sensitive and can hear quieter signals. That's what that knob does. Now let's get a little bit more time. So right now I'm only getting 25 nanoseconds, which isn't much time. But if I was to get a millisecond of time, that is the equivalent of an eon of electrical time. Now I'm going to move my trigger up a little bit. So I'm going to trigger on these big spikes that are near the top. I can use a knob here to make it a little bit easier to see. So now I can see what appears to be the charger breathing. And as we spoke before, the goal, actually, did we talk about that before? What we are measuring today is called EMI, which is electromagnetic interference. So it is the magnetic and electric noise coming out of this charger that we are using to charge my phone. So this charger right here is generating this noise on the screen that we're looking at. And the more noise that it generates, the higher this noise is, generally that would be the worse the EMI is. So more noise equals more EMI, and that is bad because this electromagnetic interference can mess with things like your Wi-Fi or your cell phone signal or your Bluetooth headset. I had a Bluetooth headset one time that would not work when I cut the grass. Guess when I want to use my Bluetooth headset? When I cut the grass. Now, why wouldn't it work when I cut the grass? Because the motor in the lawnmower generated a ton of EMI. That motors have a lot of moving metal parts that generates electric and magnetic fields, and that can cause a lot of noise. And my Bluetooth headset was poorly behaved, and so that noise was able to drown out the signal from my phone to my headset. And that was a real bummer. So I had to get a different Bluetooth headset. Now, let's check out what this noise is like. So right now, when you're looking at it, it just looks like noise with some spikes. It's kind of cool, but not entirely useful. I could do things like measure the size of the spike. So if I throw a measurement on here, the scope can do that for me. I can do a peak-to-peak measurement, and the scope can tell me that I have a 33 millivolt signal. So that's pretty useful, but all that does is tell me how big the signal is, and it doesn't really tell me where the signal is. I mean, I can see it on the screen, but there is a concept of frequency. And so Bluetooth, cell phones, your voice, they all operate at different frequencies. So one of the things that we can do is change from the time domain, which is how we're looking at the signal right now. So I can see time at the bottom and voltage along the side here. I can switch that so frequency is along the bottom. And let's do that to see where in the frequency domain is this noise sitting. Oh, that's a good point. If you had a motorized floor cleaner, you might cause noise in a hospital. So imagine some kind of sensitive electrical life-saving equipment is operating, and this huge floor cleaner comes buzzing by, and it's got a lot of spinning metal parts, and it could generate noise that could cause some real problems and be highly detrimental to breathing, which if you can avoid being highly detrimental to breathing in a hospital or really in general in life, that is a positive. Okay, so now we're looking in the frequency domain. Now, one thing to note is this spike right here. So I am using, I think I talked about it before, we'll look at it a little bit more. Let me turn my setup back on. I'm using a wireless microphone. This wireless microphone is transmitting, let's see if I can zoom in here. Can I get it focused? At 570 megahertz. So it's transmitting at 570 megahertz. That spike, well, let's get this back in focus. There we go. That spike on my scope at, strangely enough, 570 megahertz is my wireless microphone. So we will ignore that spike for now and focus more on the low end energy down here. So I can see things like, let's say 300 megahertz and below. So I'm going to make a stop frequency 300 megahertz. So I want the scope to look at frequencies from 0 hertz, so completely stopped, stand still, all the way up to 300 megahertz. And that seems to be where my charger is causing the most noise. And I can see that it's got quite a bit of noise down there. Now, there are tricks. Let's see if we can make this go a little bit faster. All right, so now we're looking at less memory, same amount of time, but less memory. I didn't need quite as much memory because I'm only looking at 0 to 300 megahertz. So one of my tricks is I can sample a little bit more slowly. And a question came in, how is this different from using a spectrum analyzer? Well, one really easy difference is I can see the time domain and the frequency domain at the same time, and they're all correlated, all with the same instrument. Another interesting difference is that I have multiple channels, so I could turn on multiple channels and look at everything at once. One of the downsides of the spectrum analyzer, and this is a constant quandary for me because I'm always being pitted against spectrum analyzers, is they only have one input. And I have seen people do some really silly things like look at 4 signals with 4 spectrum analyzers. That blew my mind. I walked into a lab one time and a guy was like, I need to measure the time difference between 4 RF pulses. So I bought 4 spectrum analyzers. And I mean, bless his heart, I really appreciated the monetary gain that my company got for selling 4 spectrum analyzers, but that is a really silly way to make that measurement. An oscilloscope has time correlated channels designed specifically to measure the time difference between different signals. So if you wanted to see time and frequency at the same time, oscilloscope. If you wanted to see multiple channels in the frequency domain at the same time, oscilloscope. If you wanted to get the best spectral accuracy possible, power meter. If you wanted to get a combination of the best spectral accuracy possible and power, then spectrum analyzer. I meant the best power. I said that wrong. Let's try that again. If you want the best power accuracy possible, power meter, and the best spectral accuracy possible, spectrum analyzer. Lots of different caveats. I'm kind of all over the place there. But, holy moly,
5 minutes remaining!
5 minutes remaining. I think it might quite literally be 5 minutes remaining because I'm not sure how long my camera battery lasts. That is a downside of the way that I'm doing the new camera. My new power adapter hasn't arrived yet, so we are playing with fire. Spectrum analyzer. So we are back to looking at the spectrum analyzer. We can see the spectrum down here. We can see the occasional burst up here in the 270 megahertz range, and it looks like it might be a little bit above that. So you know what I can do? I can make this, instead of 300 megahertz, let's make this 350 megahertz. So the scope is going to throw up a warning and say, oh, you picked a frequency band that doesn't match my memory depth. Don't worry, the scope's pretty smart, and it's like, don't worry, man, I got you. Let me fix the memory depth, and I'm still going to show you what you want to see. So you know what? Don't worry about it. Another thing that I can do is lower this resolution bandwidth. So that means each point in this spectrum analysis, in the frequency domain over down here, is going to be smaller. So they call that a bin. So I'm going to lower the resolution bandwidth and make each bin down here something really tiny. So let's make it 100 kilohertz. And now I have a noise right here at, well, let's turn on a cursor. Now we're going to use another tool, cursors, and we can use these to look at the very specific details of our spectrum. So I have a cursor on M1, which is my math trace, which is my spectrum. And let me drag my cursor out here. I think I have 2 cursors. There we go. So down here at the bottom, I can see cursor 2 is at 144 megahertz TV station. It's a good question. I don't know. Let's see. I don't know if there's a local TV station that is 140 megahertz. Perhaps that's a really good theory. And then I have a spike down here at 22 megahertz. I bet that is my maybe one of the switching frequencies in my charger. And then I have bursts happening up here that seem to be a little bit more sporadic at about 289 to 300 megahertz. This is all so an electrical engineer would look at this and presumably would know his system better than me. All I know is that I have a USB charger, a USB-based charger that is adapting my 120 hertz or 120 volt, 60 hertz AC signal into 5 to 12 volt DC lines and creating noise while it's doing it. So one of the things we could do is I am going to disconnect my phone from charging, and let's see if that affects the shape of my FFT. So I'm going to disconnect it. It's no longer charging. Oh, and you could see that the 20, look at that, the C1 down here at this end, so at 22 megahertz, that did get a little bit more bursty. So now you can see it's going on and off. We have another tool that can make it a little bit easier to see that detail, and it's called a spectrogram. So if I turn this guy on, this thing actually paints a picture. Let's adjust it so you can see some stuff. See if we can find a good picture. Basically, I'm adjusting the color to see if I can find a good, there we go, a good representation of these different bursts. A little bit. Let's adjust. See if I can adjust my scale. So one of the things I can do is adjust the scale of my FFT, and that will help my color grading down on my spectrogram, because it'll have a little bit more difference between the peaks and the noise floor. All right, so now I could hit stop, and I can see, oh, well, that was unfortunate. Let's hit single and see if I can get a burst. Oh, there was a burst. There we go. I can see some bursts in my spectrogram that are spread out. And the spectrogram is basically drawing this picture in time. So one of the things that the FFT doesn't really have a knowledge of is time. So it has a power axis and it has a frequency axis. There's no time axis. A spectrogram has a power axis, and that is the color. A frequency axis, that's along the bottom. And then the time axis is vertical. So I can see the time going from current time all the way back in time as it goes up. And I can throw on some timelines here. But before I get too deep into the spectrum analyzer or the spectrogram, which is kind of a really neat tool, I should probably wrap it up, folks, because it's been 20 minutes and it's been 5 minutes after that. Oh, their question is, does red mean bad? Not really. Red is just an easy to view color. The colors are neither bad nor good. Colors are not bad or good. They are ambivalent, and we just we're placing our own feelings on the color. So don't place bad feelings on the color red. Come on, man. Red's cool. Red's a good color. Anyway, I will be back on Thursday to look at, let's talk about spectrograms a little bit. And before I go, I also would like to mention H. So magnetism is represented by the letter H, the magnetic field strength. And so I did a little bit of research trying to figure out what the H stands for. I couldn't figure it out. I can't figure out what the H stands for. Another unit of magnetism, magnetic flux, is measured in Teslas, which is one of my favorite engineers of all time. And of course, in true engineering fashion, he was pushed to the side and replaced with the letter H. So, if anybody knows what the H stands for in magnetic field, who is it named for? Let me know. I'm going to hang out on the chat, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching. And I don't know all the nerds in my life. I don't know all the nerds in the world, but I'd love to meet them. So share with a nerd in your life. Bye.